Legged guess.
Well,
I don't think you're on.
let's see if this works. Okay, check, check, check. 1, 2. Check, check, check. Oh, I go the other way. Okay. So, do you have New Year's resolutions yet? What do you think? Oh, by the way, I guess the children can go for children's church. We're not going to do children's church. I don't think it's child friendly, actually. Well, it is, but not really. Um, so, yeah, we need to do children's church. And I would like to introduce on the way by a friend of mine. Well, friend, I guess maybe that's too strong of a word. Arch enemy? No. Aggie, the three-legged wonder pup. Aggie's actually world famous. Actually, you can just go that way, yeah. Well, first, I guess I'll explain what I want to talk about today. My name's Mark Harvey. I'm related to the pastor. For those of you that don't know, I think most of you know that. Today I'm going to talk about my dog. I'm going to tell you the story about how I got her and where she came from. And secondly, I'm going to talk about child abuse, because when the pastor asked me to talk today, I said, well, what do I know about? And then I thought, whoa, I'm an expert on a few things, and that's one of the only things. And then, well, I can give you some tips on the banjo. No, I probably can't even really help you with that. Okay, and then we'll talk about making New Year's resolutions. So, okay. Aggie, I found this article about her on this national website, petfinder.com, that really tells her story. So I decided I just wanted to read it to you because it's kind of a cool story. This happened last summer. The title of the article is "Maimed Dogs and Puppies Are Rescued Just in Time." This was posted July 29th of last year. Startover Rover was asked to help a mother dog and her 7 puppies. Located approximately 1,000 miles away, this canine family was scheduled to be euthanized the next morning. They were being temporarily housed at the St. Martin Parish shelter near St. Martinville, Louisiana. They were all victims of severe abuse and neglect. The sheriff's department had taken the animals from their abusive owner, and they were taken to the local municipal shelter. Because no one had adopted them within 7 days, they were slated to be euthanized. The shelter manager posted a plea on the internet, hoping that someone would come through for the family of dogs. Everyone involved hated the thought that they had been rescued from their abuser only to face being euthanized 7 days later. The mama dog, whom we now call Sissy, had been chained to a tree when she was just a pup. As Sissy grew, the chain grew into her neck. She gave birth to a litter of puppies when she was approximately 6 months old and still chained to the tree. After neighbors complained about Sissy's embedded collar, the abusive owner tore the chain out of her neck. She then had no way to keep Sissy except to put her in the chicken coop with the puppies. They all became flea infested. Chickens are omnivorous, and as they pecked at the fleas on the puppies, some drew blood. And then the chickens ate off part of the limbs before Sissy was able to keep them off of the puppies. This resulted in 2 of the puppies missing limbs or part of limbs. Sissy had a 2-inch deep wound around her neck where the embedded chain was removed. Okay, so this is Aggie last year. Now, it's a picture that I ripped off the internet from this article, so it's kind of grainy, but you can really see she's got staph infections all over, and she's missing part of a leg. Okay. Which she's missing more of the leg now, if you notice that she ran by, but anyway, that's besides the point. Okay, 2 of Startover Rover's board members flew to Louisiana to retrieve the family before they were euthanized. The Rover volunteers arrived at the St. Martin shelter at 11:30 that night, retrieved Sissy and her babies, and started the 19-hour drive back home. During the time, they grew especially fond of the smallest puppy in the litter, whom they named Runtley. And Riley ended up dying on the trip, and then another one of the puppies died after they got back home. The emotional Rover volunteers arrived back in Hastings around 6 p.m. that evening. They arrived to a TV truck with cameras and lots of volunteers to greet them, as well as a newly built isolation room. Volunteers at Start Over Rover worked around the clock to build the air-conditioned, separately ventilated room in only 24 hours, just in time for the arrival of Sissy and her pups. And so there's Aggie. And the other puppies, most of them I think are adopted here in town, and so you'll see some of them walking around, like Aggie's older brother lives a few blocks from us. So, okay, and then I'm kind of skipping through the article because it's like a 3-page article, but all of the remaining puppies have been adopted and are doing well. Mama Sissy's neck wound was too wide to be stitched or stapled, so they had to leave it open until it healed, and then they were able to stitch it up. Today, you can't even tell that Sissy had such a severe wound in her neck. Her coat is shiny, she's put on weight, she loves to play. Sissy was finally adopted and in a very happy home in Kearney, where she's much appreciated. After hearing her story, her new family promised that they would never put another collar around her neck. And so they just use a harness when they need to take her out, because she is kind of a crazy dog. So this is last Christmas, Aggie, the first time that she played in the snow. I don't know if they get much snow in Louisiana or not, but I don't think she'd seen much before. So now, well, let me just read to you Proverbs 24. Rescue those being led away to death, hold back those staggering towards slaughter. If you say, but we knew nothing about this, does not he who weighs the heart perceive it? Does not he who guards your life know it? Will he not repay everyone according to what they have done? And then Proverbs 31, 8 and 9. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly, defend the rights of the poor and needy. And side note, something I love about American Baptist Church, because we do this. Okay, so Samuel and Lydia and I, as we were filling out adoption papers for Aggie, now I have to admit, the reason I fell in love with Aggie was because she was not very active when she was a puppy. She just laid there, and I thought, wow, that'll be an easy dog to take care of. And it was because she was healing from infections and things. But so as we were filling out adoption papers, they Start Over Rover volunteers said, well, why don't you volunteer also? Because they don't have any paid staff there. And so Samuel and Lydia thought, hey, that's great. We can apply for our first job. And so they filled out applications and had interviews and everything. And now we volunteer. We volunteered for over a year now. Every Saturday we go and we just scoop out kitty litter and snuggle cats for a couple hours. And it's a lot of fun. And this is us in a parade, or them. And there's somebody we know back there too. The reason I brought up the Aggie story, I'm going backwards, because before I started volunteering at Start Over Rover, I was a child abuse medical expert for the 11-county region. And I have more training in child abuse than any other medical providers in the area. I've been an expert witness for the Attorney General's office for felony child abuse cases. And through my training, one thing that I learned is that animal abuse and child abuse go together. And so if an animal is being abused in a home, the statistics are about 99.9% that the children are also being abused. And so now when we talk to abused children, we ask them, are your pets doing okay? Do you worry about your pets? Does anybody hurt your pets? And so for me, transitioning, I don't do the child abuse at the Child Advocacy Center now for the last year, and so working at Start Over Rover has been a pretty fun and cool way to actually serve the same population. So through the training that I've gone to, I discovered a scientific study called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. This study is actually probably the most important piece of science that has come out in the last 100 years, other than a couple things like the atomic bomb and, there's been a couple other scientific advancements in the last 100 years, but the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study is pretty mind-boggling. And I've actually met several of the guys from San Diego who started this research. Now, one of my New Year's resolutions, I've got a lot. Let me tell you why 2014 is really important for me. On December 23rd of 2014, I'm going to turn 40. So that means I've got to get a lot accomplished in the next year, right? Or I'll be 40, and then I can accomplish it, I guess. But, okay, so I want to run a marathon. I want to start another graduate degree. So I'm applying right now for graduate school, and the reason is I want to become a scientist who studies child abuse. And that's one of my goals, and I obviously can't accomplish that goal in 1 year, but I can start the process towards it, which to be a scientist I have to enter a graduate program and do research. Okay, but I want to tell you about the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study because I know a little bit about it. So, and it applies to everything that we do here in this church. And it applies to our culture as a church, and it applies to why we are such a great church, and why we're doing things that other churches don't do. Okay, so adverse childhood experiences are unpleasant, unhappy, and hurtful things that occur while you're a child before the age of 18. Now, obviously, these things can all happen to you as an adult, and that has an impact also, but we haven't studied that quite as well. So recurrent physical abuse, recurrent emotional abuse, sexual abuse, emotional or physical neglect, living with an alcoholic or a drug abuser, having an incarcerated family member, household member, living with someone who's chronically depressed, suicidal, institutionalized because of mental illness, or just being mentally ill, a mother who is being treated violently in the home, or just even having one or no parents in the home is an adverse childhood experience. And you can actually find out your adverse childhood experiences score by taking a 10-question questionnaire online. And it's kind of interesting because, well, let me just tell you about the 10 questions. Because the research that I hope to do, actually it asks about 200 questions, and it's this huge pamphlet, and they've probably ran 100,000 people through this 100-page questionnaire so far. But you can do a short version that's only 10 questions, and it asks things like 5 personal questions about physical abuse, verbal abuse, sexual abuse, physical neglect, or emotional neglect in your home. Or the other 5 questions are about your family members. Did you have a parent who was an alcoholic, a mother who was a victim of domestic violence, a family member who was in jail, a family member who was diagnosed with mental illness, or the disappearance of a parent through divorce, abandonment, incarceration, death. Each type of trauma of those 10 things counts as 1 point, and then you can run through all 10 questions, and you have your ACEs score. Now, so an example, let's say that you were physically abused, you had an alcoholic parent, and your mother was beaten up. So that would give you an ACEs score of 3. So, why do we care? Well, the research is actually mind-boggling. ACEs are very common, much more common than we thought, which is why I want to do the research in Hastings and Grand Island, Nebraska, because nobody has done the research in this area. We have no idea if child abuse even happens in the area. But we know from the research that ACEs are surprisingly common. They occur in clusters. So if you have one adverse childhood experience, you tend to have a lot of them. They build on themselves throughout the lifespan. So if you have a lot when you're really young, you're going to have a lot more the older you get. And we have discovered that this is the basis for a lot of common health problems in the country. They're a strong predictor of your later social functioning, whether you can hold down a job, whether you can hold down a house. And they're a very strong predictor on how early you're going to die. Adverse childhood experiences are interrelated. So if you live with an alcoholic or a drug abuser, then you probably also know someone who's incarcerated. And you probably also know someone who's chronically depressed or mentally ill. And you may have a parent or a mother who's being treated violently. And you may be missing a parent. An ACEs, oh, let's see, got ACEs score. I hit the wrong button. There we go. And the adverse childhood experiences are highly interrelated. Let's see, I talked about that. Okay. If you have an ACEs score of 4 or more, you have numerous risk factors for chronic diseases. And we're talking heart attacks, we're talking strokes, we're talking lung cancer, we're talking high blood pressure, we're talking diabetes. So common, like, medical illnesses we're talking about. If you have an ACEs score of 6, you're going to die 20 years earlier than the normal lifespan of Americans. So that's kind of important from a healthcare point of view. So the top 10 risk factors for death in the United States are closely related to adverse childhood experiences. And so smoking, severe obesity, physical inactivity, depression, suicide, alcoholism, illicit drug use, and injected drug use, which they measure separately, having 60 or 50 or more sexual partners in a lifetime, and even just having a history of a sexually transmitted disease. The evidence really shows that the chronic diseases that we all worry about, like having a stroke, your chances of having a stroke if you had adverse childhood experiences goes up by 40 to 50%. And your chances of dying younger goes up quite dramatically. Basically, adverse childhood experiences, I don't know how well you can see this slide, but we call it disrupted neurodevelopment. And the way I phrase it for non-medical people is brain damage. Child abuse and even just emotional abuse or neglect causes brain damage. And then you develop impairments in all of the other areas of your life, including your emotions, your social interactions, your job. You develop high health risk behaviors like drugs and alcohol, and then you end up dying younger. We know that if you smoke 2 packs a day for 30 years, your chances of dying, it cuts 7 to 10 years off your lifespan. Adverse child experiences, on the other hand, cut at least 20 years off your lifespan. So it's kind of interesting. Your ACEs score is directly related to whether or not you smoke. So people that smoke generally have ACEs score. If you have 6 or more ACEs score, then you probably smoke. If you have 4 or more adverse childhood experiences, then alcoholism is more likely a problem. If you have 4 or more on the ACEs score, IV drug use is probably a problem. If you have 4 or more, or even 3 or more on your ACEs score, being sexually promiscuous is probably a more likely problem. Unintended pregnancy or elective abortion is much more likely a problem. This gets into politics. So when people ask me if I'm pro-life or not, I say, I want to stop child abuse. That's where I stand on politics. And this is one of the reasons. Because the kids who are being abused are the kids that end up having abortions later. Okay. Chronic depression. Suicide. Your risk for suicide goes way up if you have adverse childhood experiences score of 4 or more. And if someone in your family committed suicide, then that's puts you at higher risk, obviously. Okay, serious job problems. So instead of yelling at people that can't hold down a job, what I do now is I ask them, what got you to this place? What experiences have got you to the point where you can't even hold down a job? And it's pretty amazing. So, okay, now, we've covered all of the bad stuff. Let's move on to some less traumatic topic here. It's the week after Christmas, which we all know can actually be, the holidays can be fairly traumatic for all of us, right? Because we have to be around family members that we've been avoiding for the rest of the year. So I feel like we need like a Christmas song or maybe some jingle bells.